We had pretty rubbish weather recently, Storm Dara. Surely everyone only started getting wound up about storms when we started naming them. That's the bad idea of this, isn't it? You don't give it a name. You know, that's the problem with these things. Anyway, that's another bugbear of mine. That and Fitbits and measuring steps. Anyway, that's irrelevant. My point was, over the weekend, the in-laws have been on a cruise, to which my 4-year-old thinks they're on the Titanic and they're going to sink. But they managed to survive, no icebergs being hit. But they spent the majority of the final day of their cruise bobbing around the English Channel and North Sea, waiting to go into Tilbury until about midnight when they actually arrived. So my question is, where's the worst place you've ever waited for something?
In the lobby of the AHDB building for an interview in Coventry. It's a horrible place to wait.
Not because of the people, surely because of the circumstance of waiting for an interview.
Exactly.
Yeah. We weren't there like throwing eggs at people when they come in. It's not like that.
It's a lovely place to work.
Hello, happy Agonomics Day, which for some is a Wednesday, as that's when our episodes are released. But whenever you've chosen to listen, thanks for being a part of this podcast's growing success. And hopefully you'll agree, the shows offer a valuable insight into the world of agriculture and economics. So please keep coming back for more. I'm your host, David Udall, and this week I'm joined by not one, but two of my colleagues from AHDB. We'll kick things off by looking at the Christmas predictions with Retail and Consumer Insight Manager Emma Wantling. I'll be asking Emma how we see the current economic climate impacting the festive period and what it means for our consumption of food and drink. And later in the show, our senior red meat analyst, Becky Smith, will be on hand to discuss how prices compare against costs and much more besides. Please follow or subscribe to this podcast to make sure you don't miss an episode. New shows drop every Wednesday at midday, and please get in touch. Comment on any of AHDB's social channels or email us agonomics@ahdb.org.uk. So what have we been doing at AHDB recently? Well, I think the highlight was definitely our annual staff conference that we had, doing a bit of a forward look in terms of what the AHDB vision is for the future and how we're going to be delivering for levy payers. The other highlight was the many attempts at dancing. Is that the right way to put it? Some were successful at their attempt at dancing. Some was probably definitely a failure at their attempt at dancing at the Christmas do in the evening. But fun was had by all. And also, I should say, thank you to Tom Barker at Socobra Research, who hosted me at the AIC Seed Trade dinner last week as well in Cambridge. So it was good to go and see the great and the good of the cereal seed industry and discuss everything that's going on. And we're celebrating success in the pork industry as AHDB has played a leading role in supporting industry and discussion with governments and stakeholders to get 2 sites relisted to be able to boost our UK pork exports to China. So China is one of the UK's biggest export markets for pork, and in the annual year to 23, we exported over £180 million worth of pig meats to China and shipped £117 million of product in the first 3 quarters of 2024. So it's a huge market, obviously, in a global sense for pork, and it's really important that not only for our industry, but for our levy payers that we have access to that market. So it's been a huge success to get 2 new sites relisted so that they're able to export products to China, to be able to keep those avenues open, to keep the pork flowing and the supply chain moving. And speaking of success, we've been on a roll recently with getting our song titles in. This week's, I'm going to tell you, it's a good one, so listen intently. It may be a little bit tricky. One of them's going to be massively obvious, but I don't know. It might be so obvious you don't even realise it. Keep your ears out. It's a good one. We've got a mystery musical act for you to identify. We'll put those song titles in, we'll shoehorn them in, and they may have had a festive hit in the past. Is that too much of a hint? Probably, but it's Christmas. What are we going to do about it? So we're going to talk about Christmas first up. And it's late in the year. It's raining. It's dark outside. It's pretty grey and miserable, but there's some festive cheer to look forward to. In this whole house of mine, we've definitely got all our Christmas decorations up for that little bit of festive boost. And I'm joined by Emma Wantling from our Retail and Consumer Insight team to talk about Christmas and the consumer side of Christmas in terms of what we're expected to see from a demand perspective and how that plays out upon our sectors. So welcome, Emma. Shall we start off talking about cost of living? Because this has been something over the last couple of years which has definitely dominated the Christmas realm of consumer purchasing, and coming out of COVID as well. It's been a very kind of odd period for a couple of years, but we've seen inflation start to reduce, even though it is still a little bit sticky and won't disappear, and staying probably slightly stronger than we expected because of the budget, etc., and the forecast is showing stronger inflation. But how do we see the current economic climate impacting Christmas this year? What's the current view of the world?
So this year, it's a little bit tricky to predict, to be honest. On the one hand, we have got the cost of living crisis, and we've seen that 77% of consumers are still concerned about it. But on the other hand, we do see some degree of positivity returning. So, for example, 40% of consumers think that this Christmas is going to be more enjoyable than last Christmas. So there's a bit of a polarised situation. So what we're expecting is that the more affluent, so the higher income families will have more money to spend. But we think the middle income families will be a bit more cautious. So maybe looking at smaller treats rather than spending large amounts of money. And then lower income families really feeling the squeeze on their budget, so trying to find ways to manage their budget this Christmas.
It's an interesting one that 40% would feel that this Christmas is going to be better than last Christmas. And obviously that's because last Christmas I gave you my heart and the very next day you gave it away. Anyway, let's not talk about Wham. So how do we think people are going to shop for food and drink this year then, if that's the change? How do we think that means they're going to, change their decisions, or I suppose change their habits in store?
Yeah, because of this sort of polarised situation, we're expecting sort of two ends of a spectrum. So on the one hand, we think premium retailers, local butchers, farm shops, they're going to do really well with the higher income families looking to trade up for a more premium experience. But then at the other end of the spectrum, we think discounters are also going to do well for those who are trying to manage their budget. So there's a bit of two ends of the spectrum at play there.
I think people have definitely got used to kind of doing that shopping around aspect as well, and probably will do that thing where they pick and choose. That there's definitely a push for some of the discounted retailers to get those bulk commodities in, and then they go to those specialist retailers for the kind of special buys. I think people are definitely moving around. But let's talk about meat. Let's talk about red meat and pork from our perspective, so beef, lamb and pork. I suppose we've seen in the markets in general, and we'll talk about more in the markets with Becky later on in the podcast, that in general it's been a kind of a pretty extreme period for red meat markets, driven by a lot of different factors, and the consumer side and I think the offers side, we'll probably talk about in a minute as well, has been quite a strong driver as we've gone through the year. But it's been a definite, almost sort of slightly confusing years in some way, where you're looking at all of the market signals thinking the market should be doing one thing and yet it's doing completely the opposite. It's been a very odd time in red meat markets. But I suppose with that more, positive outlook for retail that you've outlined there, do you think that's going to be reflected in meat performance? And are we seeing a move back to the classics of turkey, or is there more of a variation in meat demand for this Christmas?
So we asked consumers whether they were going to spend more money this Christmas on meat, or the same amount or less. And what we saw was that there's more consumers saying they're going to spend more this year, outweighing those who say they're going to spend less. So we do think it's a positive outlook for meat. In terms of what they're going to purchase, turkey is still remaining the dominant choice, followed by gammon and beef. What was really interesting is we saw 23% of consumers planning to buy 2 meats for their Christmas Day dinner, and 10% planning to buy 3 types of meats. And when we looked at combinations, it was turkey and gammon or turkey and beef that were the most popular combinations.
3 types? I can't do 3 types of meat. Surely that's far too much for a Christmas dinner of 3 types of meat.
Some people like to splurge.
Yeah, that's a lot. Speaking of splurging, I don't know if that's the right link at all. If I'm honest, that might be the wrong terminology for this. Completely where I'm going. It's a good word, isn't it, to say? A year ago, I suppose a little over a year ago, we started to see a period of strong offers and discounts on lamb prices, specifically legs of lamb, but other cuts of lamb as well. And that was something that then carried on through Christmas, through into the new year, all the way up to Easter, and then running through, I suppose, the first half of the year, through Eid, Kobani as well. So obviously a lot of offers aimed at religious festivals, and that led to strong demand. We had a tight throughput in the market and very strong lamb prices in the midpoint of 2024. So it's interesting to see that we're already seeing some retailers, especially with their, I suppose, the discount cards that you can get with specific retailers as well, offering some strong promotions on lamb. So I suppose what's the view for lamb in terms of, I suppose, where we were last year? Do we think there's more offers and more promotions coming? Because it'll be interesting, I suppose, again, when we talk to Becky later on to get her market view of it as well.
Yeah, so last year was a really good year for lamb. In fact, lamb roasting joints, they grew in volume 32%, so a massive shift. But also lamb has had a really good year in general, so it's grown strongly throughout the year. And some of that growth has been from promotions and some of it hasn't. So it's not necessarily all promotion driven. But having said that, we do see across the major retailers lamb on promotion. And we do predict that lamb is going to have a good Christmas this year as well, and probably into 2025 as well.
Right. Well, we'll hold that. I'm gonna like a axeman debate. Come back to Becky and put that point to Becky to find out what she thinks that's going to be for the market impact a little bit later, Emma. But it will be interesting from a lamb. Again, it's been a really interesting market, and it'll be interesting going forwards. Last week, on the last podcast, we were talking to Susie about dairy markets and how there's a strong uplift in price recently in the wholesale market, and we're seeing some slight upticks in the milk price as well. So what about the world of dairy? How many cheeses, if you have 3 meats for your Christmas dinner, how many cheeses is an acceptable amount? I don't know. Not on your Christmas dinner. I'm not saying you're going to have like loads of cheese on your Christmas dinner. I meant more on a cheese board. How many cheeses on a cheese board? Surely there must be some kind of way of measuring that and your social class by the number of cheeses you have on a cheese board.
In our recent survey, we asked consumers what was absolutely essential to them for their Christmas meal. And having a cheese board was important for 38% of consumers. So cheese is really up there as something important. We asked them to try and say which were their top 3 varieties they'd want on their cheese board. And we saw brie, cheddar, blue Stilton. They came out top. Perhaps not surprisingly, they're sort of the standard ones. Don't really know how many and how extreme the cheese boards go. That would be an interesting thing to find out.
Well, talking about extreme cheese boards, that's got to be some kind of TV show that's made. Where's the most extreme place you could eat a cheese board? But I went out for Christmas dinner with my family at the weekend, so with my cousin and my dad. And my dad had a pizza for dinner and then had a cheese board after it. So I went for a pizza and then basically had a deconstructed pizza for his dessert as a cheese board. It seemed he's starting off his Christmas period with a lot of cheese intake. So I don't know if this is like a peer pressure thing that I'm succumbing to, Emma, but I hear a lot of people talking about air fryers. I don't own an air fryer, so I don't know if I'm missing out on something, or if I wouldn't be surprised at this, if I'm just kind of some, technological laggard that's just missing out completely. So are air fryers popular at Christmas? Is there a special thing about air fryers at Christmas that I'm just missing out on completely?
I think this could well be the year of the air fryer Christmas. So we asked consumers how they're going to cook their Christmas dinner. And yeah, there are still a lot of people using the oven and the hob, the sort of traditional ways. But we did see that 1 in 4 consumers are going to use an air fryer. Some of them are going to cook their whole Christmas dinner in an air fryer. And some of them are just going to cook part of the meal. And the parts of the meal that they tend to use the air fryer for is the meat, any type of meat, the roast potatoes and the pigs in blankets. Potentially, you might be missing out. Perhaps you need to think about an air fryer. Could help you out with your Christmas cooking.
This is just reminding me of when Vanessa, who's also in the retail and consumer team, when we were talking about halal a couple of weeks ago, and she said that her dad bought her mum a washing machine for Christmas. And I'm thinking, is an air fryer an appropriate Christmas present? I don't know. I'm going to the again, talking about the mother-in-law twice in one podcast. She'll be happy. Hello, Jackie. Going to the in-laws for Christmas. I don't know if I buy my mother-in-law an air fryer for Christmas, if she'll be offended or not. Imagine walking in with it. Merry Christmas, everyone. I think she'd cry just a little bit, maybe. Well, that might be the martini that she normally drinks at 9 a.m. on Christmas morning that makes her cry. We'll have to see. Right, so that's talking about a lot of in-home purchasing that we've spoken about there and retail side of things. But what about outside of home, food service industry? Are people having to balance the two? And is there an impact on, I suppose, on the expectations of where the money could be spent?
We've seen from our survey that around about 5% of consumers are claiming that they're going to eat out of home for their Christmas Day meal. So that's a lot of people eating in home, so good for retail. But for out of home, what we've seen year on year is that people tend to spend more in the Christmas period. So even though it's a small percentage of people eating out of home, we do expect them to be spending more. And the uplift in spend tends to be around those meat-centred dishes, so the roast meals, essentially. But there's also things like your seasonal hot milk-based drinks, so your festive spice lattes, that sort of thing, do well around Christmas. It's interesting, actually, when we ask consumers what they're going to eat for their Christmas Day if they're eating out of home. And they tend to be eating red meat more than they're saying they're going to eat turkey. So that's a good thing from a red meat point of view. And then desserts out of home tend to be a little bit less traditional. So more people choosing cheesecake than we see wanting that sort of dessert in home.
So out of home Christmas dinners boost demand for Olivia Payer's product, basically.
Yes.
That's a new thing I've learned today. I've never had Christmas dinner out. Maybe I should now. Never done it. Right, Emma, thank you so much for that. It was really interesting to, I suppose, get the view of Christmas. We're going to take a short break now to get the latest in what's happening in the markets. And when we come back, we're going to talk to Becky about what it means from the overall market position with regards to prices. And specifically, I want to know more about lamb.
Hi, I'm Olivia Bonser, Senior Analyst at AHDB, with a look at grain and oilseed markets for the week commencing the 6th of January. Despite some support in wheat markets over the Christmas period, prices have been under pressure in the new year from a strengthening US dollar, technical selling and sluggish global demand. However, Russian wheat crop conditions remain in focus, with warmer than usual temperatures and excess moisture in key growing regions. Persistent hot and dry weather in Argentina is also raising concern over the country's maize crop, which is now in its critical development stage. For rapeseed, new crop prices are supported, with doubts over prospects for global rapeseed production in 2025, though forecasts of heavy soybean supplies from South America limit any major price increases. Over the next few weeks, weather in major exporting countries such as South America and Russia will be key in driving prices. The USDA will also release updated global supply and demand estimates at the end of this week. To stay up to date with the latest data and analysis across arable, red meat and dairy markets, head to hdb.org.uk and click on Markets and Prices.
If you're in the market for another podcast to subscribe to, then look no further than our Manager's Special, AHDB's Food and Farming podcast. Recent episodes include a consumer insight offering on red meat labels and supermarket aisles, as well as a dairy special about our work with retailers to promote milk. If you're after herbs, or rather herbal lays, our shelves are stacked with sage advice on how to introduce lucerne and clover into your fields. In fact, we cater for all tastes, so you'll find sections dedicated to all sectors: pork, cereals and oilseeds, dairy and beef and lamb. And don't forget our middle aisle, where you can often pick up a bargain episode you didn't know you needed to listen to. Search Food and Farming wherever you get your podcasts. AHDB thanks you for your custom.
So in that break, while we were getting the latest on the markets, we were talking about all of the boring yet functional Christmas presents that we've received. Whether my brother does get a ladder from my dad, let's find out. But producer Martin's getting dehumidifiers. They're needed. We were talking about getting those window vacuums to get condensation off the windows. All of the things that actually aren't really exciting, but ultimately will probably make your Christmas. And before the break as well, we're talking to Emma in the Retail and Consumer Insight team about consumer trends, whether anyone's going to be eating, hot dog or a beef burger or whatever it would be for their Christmas dinner. I'll be satisfied with, I think, just one meat. I don't think I need more than that. I can't remember what we've got. I think we might have a turkey and a gammon, so we'll see where we go. But Becky, we were talking in that first half about lamb and how Emma was saying we're expecting to see a sort of continued period of stronger retail demand for lamb, and we're already seeing some promotions and offers. As we were saying, a year ago was when we started seeing quite a strong push on the retail side, leading into a tighter market that was seeing less throughput, led to higher prices through 2024. From a market point of view, from a price point of view, if that is the outcome that we're expecting from a retail side, what does the supply side look like for lamb, and will we see another stronger period of prices going through this next year?
Yeah, so I think you've said kind of coming through 2024, we obviously saw that real growth in prices in the beginning part of the year. We've kind of seen those really stay at that sustained level. So they've stayed around kind of between 40 and 60p higher than year ago levels throughout most of 2024. And as Emma mentioned, a big part of that has been that demand side, where we've seen really strong demand from retail. But kind of the other side to that is the supply side. Obviously, we saw in the spring a lot of challenges around lambing, some with weather and some with disease, which really reduced our lamb crop for this year. We've then kind of coming through the year, had more challenges. Some people have had challenges, really quite regional challenges with disease, with trade barriers, all of those kind of things that's kept our production quite tight. So far for the year, we're down about 7% so far. And looking forward to next year, I think we're still expecting some of those challenges. So there's a real risk of blue tongue in the new year. We're expecting that our breeding flock is likely to be reduced. Some chat around people kind of selling those ewes for breeding in this spring while the price was so high. So potentially we've got that reduced breeding flock, all kind of contributing to an expectation of a slightly smaller lamb crop again in 2025. So really kind of keeping those supplies quite tight. If, as Emma says, that retail demand continues to persist, I think those factors probably point to continued strength in the lamb market going forward.
Yeah, I think so. And it's a really interesting one in the lamb market, because it's one of those periods where it feels everything seems quite extreme, but is this now just like a new normal price point that we're at? That if you look from the start of November, we were at about 614 pence a kilo on a deadweight SQQ at the start of November, and then by the end of the month we were at 686 pretty much pence per kilo. So we've seen a 70 pence increase through 1 month as well. It wasn't really until sort of mid-January that we sort of started to see the prices rise to similar levels. I mean, it was mid-February by the time we got to sort of 689 pence a kilo last year. So we're already at a strong position. And I think, as you said, with the combined effects of the strong retail, we're already seeing a tighter throughput, as you said, with lower kill. I guess the one thing, as you mentioned, that sort of concerns me about the longer term aspect of the market in terms of the ability for farmers to be able to financially gain from this is that disease impact. And if we see a high prevalence of blue tongue, and if there is greater restrictions on movements, etc., whilst the market may be at a high price point, how much of that is achievable? And then obviously with the increased costs that come through with disease management, etc., it may mean that there's some positive headlines in price, but actually when we drill down into sort of the farm efficiency aspect of it, it doesn't necessarily equate straight away to just a massive easy profit being made at all. It's two very different things. Right, how about the beef side then? How about the beef side? Do you think there are people out there that have beef and lamb as their Christmas dinner meats, one of each?
Red meat heavy, that is.
Yeah.
They both do well at Christmas, don't they? Emma will correct me. I'm sure they both over-index an awful lot at Christmas. So maybe some people are feeling decadent.
Maybe they are. So how does the beef market look at the moment leading up to Christmas?
The beef market is flying at the moment. So we've seen those prices really climbing up over the last couple of months, really. The interesting thing on the beef side is we've also seen that production come up. So in October, we saw from DEFRA figures, beef production up 12% year on year. So really that kind of higher headage coming through. Some of that was driven, that's UK production. So some of that was driven by Northern Ireland. But we kind of in October, we really saw increases across GB as well. Some of that is kind of anticipation for Christmas kill. And also, I think looking further ahead, a lot of our kind of through our forecasting and using the BCMS data, and there's a general feeling in the market that cattle supplies are going to tighten up as we move kind of towards the end of this year and into 2025. So we have seen that start to come through in our estimated kill, which comes through AHDB. So through November, we saw estimated kill come down 2% year on year. So maybe we've kind of passed that peak of kill, and we're coming now into that tighter market, which obviously is still really underpinning the price there as the supplies are slightly tighter. I think this is an interesting one looking forward, as if supplies kind of tighten up as we expect, if those cattle aren't there, does that continue to support the price, or is there kind of a breaking point on that one?
And that's the thing. I mean, we're kind of in uncharted territory in this area now, aren't we? That it doesn't seem that long ago that we were getting excited that the price was on overall deadweight steers was breaking through the £5 per kilo mark, 500 pence a kilo. Again, just clarifying there that £5 is 500 pence for those that needed help with that. I think I did. And now we're kind of heading towards 550. So kind of the natural point is going, well, how far can we go? We're already at a massive spread to where we were this time last year, or about 50p, 60p per pence per kilo higher. It is an interesting one. As an old trading manager used to say to me, market highs are for buying, because there's a reason that the market is going up. So if the market keeps on going up and hits a new high, buy it, because there's a reason for that. So keep on following it up. And it kind of feels as if there's just that momentum about it at the moment. But as you say, there will be a point where it will break. And is this just the sort of extreme end of a commodity cycle, of us being at very high prices, or is this something that is breaking towards the new normal structure? And it may be that this is the new normal structure, because we released our 2030 work a couple of weeks ago, and when we're talking about that, pointing to lower supplies through till now and the end of the decade. So maybe this is just a new normal price point for the market. It may seem extreme, but very quickly it could become the normal level. Cool. Thank you, Becky. I suppose the reason that we want to talk about the consumer demand, and it may seem that we're sort of, being slightly flippant talking about Christmas, but it is a really important time of the year because it does generate such a huge demand for all of the categories that we're looking at. But it's important from a levy payer perspective, either from a processing business or from a farmer business, to understand these longer term trends. And what we are looking for from a retail side is if there's any longer term structural shifts in demand, because that is the demand side of the equation that is going to help to form the price, that's being met with these very tight markets. And overall, we're looking at the impact on price, but it is a really important thing to look at that longer term view and see if those consumer trends are changing. So linking these two sides of the market is the raison d'etre of an economist, to look at both the supply and the demand side to understand that total view. And hopefully we've spent 20 minutes or so explaining that. And for those of you that were listening intently would have noticed that the artist of this week is one of, I think, my favourite Christmas songs. It was Shakin' Stevens. Didn't just do Merry Christmas, Everyone. No. Had far more hits than that. He was a modern great of late 70s through late 80s faux rock Elvis impersonator kind of vibe, but he did it well. We still love you, Shaky. So yeah, Shakin' Stevens was the artist this week, and we got a lot in as well. We got a lot in. We did well this week. I'm well happy with that. Right, thank you for listening to Agonomics. We'll be back next week, and I think we're going to be talking about what the production for cereals and oilseeds looks like for 2025, which will be interesting. Enjoy your advent calendars, and we will speak to you soon.